You know that feeling when you're fully immersed in what you're doing? When you're pushing the limits of your skill level while staying just within them, so focused that you lose track of time? And then you falter, wipe out, and get a game over message like fail or drained or even fart. That's the flow state peppered with comedic moments that Whitewater Wipeout draws you into as you crank your way to conquering the waves. Welcome to the Playdate podcast, bringing you stories from game developers, designers, and the team behind Playdate, the little yellow game console with a crank. I'm Krista Mergen. This week, I'm talking with some folks from Chuhai Labs, creators of Whitewater Wipeout, the slick and highly addictive homage to the classic California games by Epix. Slight spoiler alert, we do talk about the mechanics of the game with reference to specific tips and tricks for getting high scores. Okay, let's meet the team and hear about how this all got started.
Hi, I'm Giles Goddard, and I am the lead programmer and CEO at Chuhai Labs.
My name is Charlie March. I'm the sound designer and composer on Whitewater Wipeout.
And my name is Peter Traylor, and on Whitewater Wipeout, I was the artist and did some game design as well.
And hey, everybody, I'm Mark Lentz. I'm the producer over at Chuhai Labs. Yeah, so I first heard about the Playdate from our buddy Nick Sutner.
Nick Sutner helps Panic with game publishing and business development and connected the Playdate team with some of the indie developers who ended up making games for Season 1. Nick has worked in the games industry for years as a writer and a consultant, and he has some great podcasts you should check out too. Anyway.
I really like Nick Sutner, and the first day I met him, we went hiking for 8 hours in Busan, Korea. Like, we had met the day before, and I was hungover, and he doesn't drink.
That's true. It was Mark, myself, and Chris Hecker, who works on a Spy Party. Chris and I were there to give talks at Busan Indie Connect.
Busan Indie Connect is an independent games festival held in Busan, Korea.
And the three of us just ended up going on this long hike around the coast.
So I was hungover, and I find him to be just absolutely so charming. Like, he took photos of every spider we saw along the way, and we're talking hundreds of photos.
There were all these spiders, really big, meaty, chubby spiders all around the edge of the hiking path. But then the sun went down. And so we were hiking pretty much in the dark, surrounded by spiders that you couldn't see. It was very exciting. And, I got to know both of them pretty well. And we were kind of fast friends by the end of it.
We ended the night by going to a jjimjilbang, which is like a sauna. And imagine this is the first day you've ever met anybody, and then you're suddenly naked with them. You become intimate with them really fast. And we built some sort of trust really quickly. And he came down to Kyoto.
To Bit Summit.
Bit Summit is also an indie games festival held annually in Kyoto, Japan.
Out of nowhere, he was like, hey, have you ever seen this thing before? And it was this very small object. It was yellow. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen as far as consoles go. And almost immediately, I was obsessed with it.
I got the impression Mark was in love.
I took as many selfies as he would let me take. He wouldn't let me turn the damn thing on. He wouldn't let me take it around. I had to hold it in his presence, but I was just immediately enamored. When he showed me that, I was just like, man, can I use my trust? Can today be the day that I exploit our friendship?
Well, Panic just didn't have very many physical Playdate units to provide to developers at that point. And the first season of Playdate games was limited, so it was hard to pick and choose who got hardware to develop games on. But Nick had known about the folks at Chuhai Labs for years, and had even worked with some of the team before.
When Chuhai were called Vitae, they worked on several small second-party Nintendo games. So they worked on the submarine game for the original DS, I think, the launch game. And they would make these smaller scaled games that had a well-developed take on a unique mechanic or angle. And they just had a history of these types of things. And I had signed a game of theirs, again, when they were called Vitae, called Paper Valley, a really cool sort of VR paper airplane exploration game. And they recently released a really beautiful snowboarding game for Oculus that they're working on for a long time. I also knew that Giles, their co-founder, worked on Star Fox and other things. So they had this great lineage, but they also had a lot of new, exciting, unique ideas. And they just seemed like the perfect kind of company where if they were excited, we definitely wanted to equip them with hardware to sort of experiment and explore some ideas.
And it's sure enough, he sent us a unit maybe a few months later, and we didn't know what to do with it. We were absolutely nervous because suddenly we're like, oh no, what do we do? We've got this thing. It was almost too exciting.
Yeah, the Chuhai team was delighted to get some hardware to develop on, but there were so many possibilities and game ideas that they realized they needed some kind of organized way to decide what to even make for this new device. Here's Giles Goddard. lead programmer and CEO.
So we got hold of some Playdates from Panic, and we immediately had a game jam because everybody wanted to do a prototype or something on the device. We just sort of got together for a week and everybody came up with one idea for a game and made a little mini presentation.
So the pitch jam was bonkers. We had every single person come up with a pitch. They had 3 days to do it, and then they had to pitch it in front of all of the company. I think that every single person used the crank in some method because you want to. It's a new peripheral, so you have to use it. It was really inspiring to see fantastic ideas, not as fantastic ideas. Everybody, as soon as they hold it, as soon as they see it, they're immediately inspired to make something that maybe no one else had thought about, except for fishing. Everybody comes up with fishing on their own like they're a genius. I didn't mean to be snide, but the fact is, like, everyone does come up with it. That doesn't mean someone can't make the best fishing game, because I'm sure there is a fishing game. I'm sure of it.
It's quite easy to think of an obvious crank game like a fishing game or something like that. But the idea behind the game jam, pitch jam thing was to think more of the fun side of it rather than just trying to get the crank into the gameplay. So at the end of the week, we had like 10 or 15 of these ideas, and mine was Whitewater.
It was actually an absolute blast. We had all these limitations to the pitches. So, okay, you're only allowed to use 3 slides. You only have 3 minutes to do the entire thing. And at the end of the day, we're going to do a vote. And the idea was we're going to make the top 2 games. Well, there wasn't top 2. It was Whitewater Wipeout by a landslide.
I won, not because I'm the boss, because it was the best idea, because it was instantly, you could tell that it would work with the crank, because everybody knew the California games already. So it was quite obvious that it was going to be so much fun to play. The crank and the screen is the star of the Playdate. So the first game, I really wanted to make something that you could only really use with a crank, you know what I mean? I mean, you can do surfing with buttons, but it was very, very different because you don't have the immediate control over the board.
We felt that it maximized on the crank in a way that you could immediately understand it. There's no uphill battle to why you would be using the crank. If you turn the crank left, you go left. And like a lot of ours, mine especially, like was really complex, and it doesn't expose how cool the crank really can be. And so it just made the most sense. And we just thought, all right, let's put all of our eggs in this one basket because this really is something special. I'm not saying it's the most unique game ever invented. Of course not. But it's such a callback to California games. And California games is really special to Giles. That's one of his favorite games. As a kid, he would play that with his brother. So it like really means something to him.
My brother had a Atari Lynx, which is a sort of a handhold, like a Switch, basically, but 30 years ago. Didn't sell very well. It wasn't very popular, but it was great fun. And the best game by far was California Games. And the best game within that was the surfing game. It was me and my brother's favorite game for ages.
Oh, I used to play California games with my brother, too. We had the NES version, plus this kind of weird board game version called VCR California Games. It involved a VHS tape. I don't know. Anyway, the Atari Lynx version, the NES version, that weird board game, and all of the other versions of California games were published by a video game company called Epix. The game was initially available for the Apple II and Commodore 64 in 1987, and then eventually ported to lots of different computers and gaming consoles. It was a big hit. And California Games was basically a bunch of different mini-games for different sports that were associated with California, like skateboarding, roller skating, footbag, also known as hacky sack in real life, BMX biking, flying disc, and of course, surfing.
It almost felt that each mini-game within California Games was made by a different team, and the surfing part of that was just such a tight, well-made game. We didn't want to make a straight copy. We wanted to make a better version of the surfing game. So like a homage, but sort of fix a few things that I thought they could have done better and sort of introduce a few more techniques. And also I added some better physics because the physics, they were great for the time, but I just added a more sort of detail to the physics, as it were. So it was kind of almost a no-brainer that the crank was going to be the way to control the surfboard. It was surprising how easy it is to develop on. I mean, with Nova...
Nova is Panic's native code editor for the Mac, so of course it works seamlessly with Playdate's software development kit.
Editing text, hitting a button and seeing the thing instantly changes, that's kind of... I'm so used to sort of like 5-minute turnarounds for things like Oculus Quest on Unreal.
Unreal is a game engine that runs on various 3D gaming consoles, including the Oculus Quest, which is a crankless virtual reality headset.
So to have that sort of quick back and forth between, editing and getting it playing on Playdate it's so nice. I mean, it really is such a nice thing to develop on. Another a nice thing was the fact that it's surprisingly powerful, especially, even using a high-level language like Lua, you don't really notice any sort of slowdowns just because you're using Lua. And I think maybe for Whitewater, because there's no GPU.
GPU is short for Graphics Processing Unit, a separate, specialized processor for rendering graphics.
It's quite slow at making big sprites rotate. So what we actually did is, before you start the game, it pre-renders all the rotations for the board so that we can have it sort of at 30 hertz without any slowdown. You kind of know your limitations when you go in. So you're not trying to sort of cram all this stuff that you don't really need into the game. What you see is what you get with the device. So it's a great way of sort of concentrating on the gameplay. It's a challenge, but it's a really nice challenge, to be honest.
Yeah. So how did the rest of the Chuhai team rise to the challenge?
When we started to develop the game, we basically pulled the entire studio in. I think we were at full capacity on this game. We just absolutely really wanted to work on this. Our 3D animator, Peter Trailer, is classically trained in 3D, and he started with 3D models and then downsampled them to pixel art. And Giles had a great plan on how to execute that, because we knew that it would take longer for a 3D animator to learn how to do pixel art than to just use this skill that he already has and he's good at. He had no experience in the 2D world, and for him, it was probably the most exciting, because I think that he learned the most in the development process over anybody else. He is constantly tinkering and always trying to figure out ways that we can go back to the Playdate.
It was really fun work on the Playdate. I mean, no doubt it has its limitations, but I think as an artist, especially, like when you're given limitations, it kind of breeds creativity. Like, you're thinking, with these limitations, what can I make? How can I use the tools that I have to make something that feels bigger than what the limitations seem to impose? I think one of the best things about this game is definitely like the giant wave that's chasing you the entire time. It was definitely a lot of fun and a massive challenge to kind of figure out, how do you get like a giant animated wave, present it on this tiny screen with 1-bit pixel art. I mean, it's key. That thing has to be epic, has to be terrifying, and it has to chase you, because it's basically motivating you to keep going. And so kind of breaking that down and figure out how to get the frames animating correctly, like which frames animate when, and how do you get the curl to come over on the wave and as it chases the player. Like, getting all that right was so key to the experience. It's a ton of fun as well. I really, really enjoyed that. And I think the effect that it has is dramatic. Like, you are under pressure to keep moving, but keep moving quickly. But at the same time, like, it really shows how big that wave is, and it feels like it's larger than the screen.
It was kind of like stunning for us to see on Playdate the first time, I think, with this kind of quasi 3D wave effect. I used the crank really well.
Yeah, the wave is beautifully rendered and definitely gives you that sense of urgency that I think really helps you stay focused and in the flow of the game, because it's just relentless. And for me, there was a lot of trial and error at first with doing the tricks and figuring out the scoring. So I asked Giles and Mark if they had any tips or tricks for newbies.
There's actually quite a few little sort of tricks you can do while you're surfing. For instance, sort of head off a wave, you can sort of boost up, you can lean back on the board and get a kind of boost. There's lots of those little things that I've kind of added to make it just a very quite deep gameplay experience. You got to get speed up quite quickly. And the best way to get speed up is actually to do a trick. So basically, go down the wave, go up, do a 180 or a 360, whatever, and then come back down, and then do another one. And then you'll immediately get enough speed to be able to be doing sort of triples and quadruples every time. You have to try and do tricks as quickly as possible, basically.
Whitewater Wipeout features a global leaderboard that shows you the highest scores. So there's always something to work toward, or just feel kind of humbled by.
You need to be doing combos all the time to get the high scores. And the way the combos work is you have to get the same or better trick every time, unless it's a quadruple or a triple. So if you do a 360, then you have to get a double or a 360. If you do a double, then you have to get a double or a triple. I think that's how it works. Then once you're doing triples and quadruples, you can sort of alternate between either of those. But you have to be doing the combos to get the big scores.
I'll tell you, the best way to improve your score is to not be me. I am literally the worst player at Whitewater Wipeout, but Not every game has to be for everyone. Like, it doesn't click in my brain, but I watch other people at our studio and it's the best. It's magic to them. And I like seeing their joy more than knowing that I'm frustrated that I suck at it.
There's a kind of rhythm you get into once you start doing the triples and quadruples where you don't really have to think about how many times you're spinning the crank, or you get into kind of flow state. I've seen people play this for hours, actually. Well, it's almost quite worrying, how addicted people get to it.
Yeah, I'm definitely one of those people for whom it is super addictive. It's hard to describe why. There's this feeling of wanting to do bigger and better tricks while constantly being right on the edge of almost messing up while this massive wave is barreling down on you. And then other obstacles pop up randomly, so you have to stay agile. I think it's that perfect blend of challenging and fun that, along with the soundtrack, puts me in this zen-like state where I just want to keep surfing. The sound design is simple and classic, and it's the music that really ties the beautiful art and animation together with the challenging gameplay. It manages to feel nostalgic and modern at the same time, with a killer title screen theme, and the main gameplay loop just really helps create that immersive flow state for me.
Yeah, the music was made by Chuhai Labs. He's a musician from the UK, and he kind of pivoted to being a sound designer here at the studio. And he really knocks it out of the park because he's an old tech guy, and he brought over his Game Boy, and everything was made on a Game Boy, and everything was made like as naturally and as limited as possible.
I was just going to assume that if you're listening to this podcast, you know what a Game Boy is. But since we may have some young folks in the audience, the Game Boy was an 8-bit handheld gaming console released by Nintendo in 1989. Its screen had a beautiful palette of 4 shades of green, and the sound system featured 4 channels. There were 2 square sound waves, a triangle wave, and a white noise generator, but you would not believe how much people can do with a few basic sound waves and some white noise. So to give Whitewater Wipeout that late 80s, early 90s vibe, composer Chuhai Labs created the sound design and music using the classic Game Boy.
The soundtrack itself was inspired by the California Games composer for the Lynx, Bob Vieira, who I was a huge fan of when I was a kid. So to get a chance to sort of emulate that was really fun. When we came to work with the Playdate to begin with, I was really surprised because obviously it's sort of 1-bit graphics, but the sound capabilities are really high on it. So I decided to actually compose all the stuff on a Game Boy using a program called LSDJ, and all the music and sound effects were composed on that for the game.
You look at the Playdate and you see the limitations, so it's kind of like, why not lean into the limitations and go forward with that, because it almost makes it so you can just focus entirely on creativity rather than technology.
It was really fun work on the Playdate. I think as an artist, especially, like when you're given limitations, it kind of breeds creativity. Like you're thinking, with these limitations, what can I make? How can I use the tools that I have to make something that feels bigger than what the limitations seem to impose? It's a lot of fun. I can't wait to work on something else.
We want to work on Playdate titles like indefinitely. It's kind of our perfect platform. That said, we do have a couple of demos already whipped up for the Playdate.
Watch this space because we have some really cool stuff coming out soon.
We're developing a pseudo sequel, a prequel to one of our mainline games called Carve Snowboarding, and it's called Carve Junior.
Just want to jump in here and say that I've played a beta version of this game, and it is so fun. I might like it even better than Whitewater Wipeout. So it won't be part of Season 1, but keep an eye out for news on when Carve Jr. will be available to play.
I'm going to say this from the heart, and I actually mean this. My name's on the credits for a few games now, but the one I'm most proud of is actually Whitewater Wipeout, because I got to help see this from the very beginning to the very end. It was so cool to see it grow and become something that a lot of people are going to like, and on a console that it's going to have legs, and people are going to love this thing for a long time because it's so quirky and it's so limited.
Given the choice, I would only work on Playdate from now on. Thank you for Panic for making such a brilliantly cool device. I mean, I've been a fan of Panic for ages, since Transmit, I think, or Coda.
Oh yeah, until pretty recently, Panic mostly made Mac and iOS software, primarily tools for software developers. It's a long story.
And also, I'm a huge fan of teenage engineering, so those two combined is a dream product, I think.
I really hope everyone enjoys the Playdate in general, and definitely Whitewater Wipeout when it comes out.
I really love getting into the zone with Whitewater Wipeout, and I hope you enjoy playing it too. You'll probably beat my high score. That's fine. Thanks so much for listening, and stay tuned for more episodes coming soon to the Playdate podcast feed.
Thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye.
The Playdate podcast was written, produced, and edited by me, Krista Mergen. Cable Sasser and Simon Panrecker composed the theme song. Additional music and sound effects were composed by Charlie March and come from Whitewater Wipeout. Huge thanks to Tim Coulter and Asher Cabrera for wrangling the podcast feed and working on the website, as well as to Nevin Mergen, who created the podcast artwork and site design. And thanks, as always, to everyone at Panic. Playdate is shipping now and available to order at play.date.
So the game over messages, we've got, I think, 50 in there all told.
A lot of those were Mark Lentz's words, I think you can probably tell.
I was the writer on those because I'm oddly the silly one of the company.
But they don't mean anything. The game over messages are just silly messages. They were a lot worse to begin with. All the offensive ones basically were deleted.
I did get fart, though.
You didn't get fart? You might have. But if you did, I didn't write that. That's all I'm saying.